In the heart of Beverly Hills, billionaire Damian Walker stages his own downfall to expose the true nature of the two women closest to his children. When his glamorous fiancée Emily Hart reveals cruelty toward his young twins, their nanny Rosa Martinez steps in with a courage Emily never had. But as Damian pushes his ruin to the limit, the masks begin to fall and the truth about loyalty, love, and greed becomes impossible to ignore. Damian Walker had always believed that the real character of a person appeared only when wealth, comfort, and reputation were stripped away. As one of Los Angeles' most recognizable real estate moguls, he had lived long enough in a world of glittering facades to know that everyone could behave like an angel inside a Beverly Hills mansion, surrounded by marble floors and chilled champagne. What he needed to know was who would remain standing beside him if that marble cracked beneath their feet. And though he had spent years building skyscrapers, he had never constructed anything more delicate than the family he wanted for his young twin boys. That was why, on a quiet afternoon drenched in California sunlight, as he drove up the steep driveway of his estate, Damian braced himself for the hardest test he had ever set in motion. His fiancée, Emily Hart, had entered his life during a charity gala filled with flashing cameras, designer gowns, and the kind of people who spoke in filters as if every sentence needed to be Instagram-ready. Emily had beauty polished into perfection and confidence sharpened enough to cut glass. But what Damian was no longer certain of was whether she had the kind of heart that could love anything that didn't come with a brand label. She admired his wealth, adored his influence, and flaunted his name as a ticket to a world she had always wanted to dominate. But did she care about Leo and Mason, his 3-year-old twins who still mispronounced half their words and loved trucks more than expensive toys? Did she care about him? Or was he, like so many other men in her orbit, simply a stepping stone toward a lifestyle she intended to secure permanently? Those questions had grown into a tight knot in Damian's chest over the past months, pushing him toward the drastic decision that started unfolding the moment he parked his car outside the mansion. Inside, chaos greeted him, not the kind born of accidents but the kind forged out of cruelty. He entered the living room just in time to see Emily's hand sing through the air toward Leo, who stood frozen with chocolate smeared across his small fingers. Her designer dress, imported and outrageously priced, had a tiny brown smudge near the waistline, and that was enough to unleash her fury. Before the blow could reach the child, Rosa Martinez moved faster than Damian had ever seen her move. The young nanny who came from East LA and wore exhaustion like a badge of honor after long hours caring for the twins, stepped between Emily and Leo, taking the full force of the slap. The sound cracked against the marble, echoing louder than it should have, louder than any adult confrontation ever ought to sound in a home where children lived. Rosa didn't stumble. She protected Leo with her entire body, arms wrapped tightly around the boy as if she could absorb not just the hit, but the fear that followed it. Her cheek reddened instantly, but she kept her back straight, her focus fixed solely on the trembling toddler pressed against her uniform. Mason clung to her legs, sensing danger even if he didn't have the words to describe it. Damian stood in the archway frozen for half a second as conflicting emotions flared through him: rage, disbelief, and a sickening rush of clarity. Emily was yelling, calling Rosa names, complaining about the dress as if the garment had feelings and the child did not. Rosa, still catching her breath from the slap, looked up with a mixture of pain and unwavering determination. She refused to let go of the twins. This was the exact moment, the absolute truth he needed to see before moving forward with his plan. His test had begun sooner than expected, harsher than he imagined it would. Emily's mask slipped almost too easily, revealing something cold beneath her polished exterior. She hadn't noticed Damian standing there yet. She was too busy blaming a toddler for ruining couture fabric, too outraged to consider how violently she had reacted to a simple accident. Damian watched her, remembering the countless small warning signs he had ignored: the irritation when the boys spilled juice, the flinches she suppressed when they wanted a hug, the way she always spoke of them as accessories to his image instead of human beings with their own little worlds. But none of those signs compared to what he had just witnessed. Rosa, on the other hand, was holding the two boys like a mother would, whispering reassurance to them while her cheek blazed with the mark of the slap. Her voice trembled, but her resolve did not. She knew she was only the nanny, a woman hired to help, not someone with power or privilege in this mansion. Yet she had stepped in without hesitation. She had taken a hit that wasn't hers to take, and she wasn't backing away. She shielded the boys as if her own life had been threatened. Damian's heart twisted at the sight. Rosa had been with his family for 3 years, long enough to know the boys' favorite bedtime songs, their fears of thunder, the tiny differences in their smiles. She was gentle, patient, and tireless, the kind of person who brought warmth into cold rooms. She wasn't glamorous like Emily. She didn't crave attention or praise. But what she had, what Damian was now discovering in stark, undeniable contrast, was something Emily lacked entirely: genuine love for his children. Emily finally turned and saw Damian. Her anger vanished instantly, replaced by a trembling performance of shock and victimhood. She hurried toward him, complaining about how Rosa had attacked her, how the children were out of control, how the dress was ruined. Damian didn't believe a word. With every excuse she made, every exaggerated plea for sympathy, the truth of who she really was became clearer. And as he looked at her and then at Rosa, he knew the test he was about to execute, pretending he had lost everything, was not only the right decision but possibly the only way to reveal the full depth of her motives. He stood there watching the two women who represented two possible futures for his family. One future was cold, superficial, and dangerous for his boys. The other was built on compassion, sacrifice, and a loyalty that money couldn't buy. For the first time, Damian understood that his elaborate plan might not simply expose character, it might save his sons from growing up under the influence of someone who saw them as burdens rather than blessings. And so, standing in his mansion with tension radiating across the room, Damian Walker took a steady breath. This was the moment he committed, fully and without hesitation, to the deception that would unravel every truth hidden beneath the surface of their lives. Everything that came next would be painful, everything would be messy, but everything would be necessary. Because now he knew, without doubt or hesitation, that the test he was about to unleash needed to happen not for him, but for the two small boys still trembling in Rosa's arms. Damian Walker had rehearsed the lines in his head for days, imagining all the different ways the moment might unfold. He pictured Emily crying, collapsing dramatically onto a velvet chaise, demanding answers. He pictured her touching his face with trembling hands and promising she would stand by him no matter what. He even imagined her dropping everything: her sponsorship deals, her influencer events, her curated life, to prove that she loved him more than money. But none of those versions felt realistic anymore. Not after the way she had raised her hand at his son and unleashed her fury without a shred of remorse. When he finally cleared his throat and announced the fall of the Walker empire, the reaction he received wasn't heartbreak or loyalty, it was annoyance, irritation, and disbelief that such a joke could ruin her afternoon. He started slowly, crafting the tone of a man defeated. "Emily," he said, loosening his tie as if oxygen itself was becoming hard to reach, "we're not going to the gala tonight. Something happened." She barely glanced up from her phone, where she was scrolling through comments under her newest post, a carefully staged photo of her standing beside his Rolls Royce. She dismissed him with a flick of her hand, assuming he meant something trivial. But when Damian continued speaking, this time with weight behind every syllable, she finally lowered her phone. He told her everything, or rather, the version he wanted her to believe. A merger gone wrong. Partners who had betrayed him. A sudden freeze on all his corporate and personal accounts. Government investigations into transactions that didn't even exist. Properties being seized, vehicles repossessed, staff already notified. Overnight, he had gone from billionaire to a man who didn't even know where he would sleep the next month. Her mouth fell open, not in concern but in horror. "What do you mean everything? What do you mean frozen? What do you mean we can't go to the gala?" Her voice rose with each word, as if the potential collapse of her social calendar was more catastrophic than the financial ruin of the man she lived with. Damian kept his expression tired, broken, perfectly embodying the character of a man whose world had been shattered. He sank into the sofa as if gravity had doubled in weight. He let his shoulders sag, his eyes dim, his hands shake slightly. He looked like someone who had lost not just money but purpose. And yet, beneath the performance, he observed Emily closely, watching her every twitch, every wrinkle of disgust forming between her brows, every flash of calculation darting behind her blue eyes. Rosa stood quietly near the stairs, her cheeks still red from the slap she had taken earlier. She didn't seem to care about the drama or the implications of Damian's words for her future employment. Her only concern was the two boys clinging to her legs, sensing tension in the room. She watched Emily with a mix of caution and disappointment, and as Damian continued his act, Rosa's eyes lingered on him, too confused, sympathetic, but never questioning. Emily, meanwhile, processed the information like someone sorting through the ruins of a burning mansion, trying to see what she could save. "This is temporary, right?" she asked stiffly after a long pause. "You'll fix it, you always fix things." Damian shook his head, adding heaviness to the gesture. "Not this time, we were going to lose the house within the week. The bank has already filed notices, there's nothing left." Emily blinked, her face going white for a split second before anger replaced shock. Are you kidding me, Damian? You had one job: keep us afloat. How could you let something like this happen? Do you have any idea what this will do to my brand? I have partnerships lined up. I have a photo shoot tomorrow. I can't show up looking like some homeless charity case. Rosa flinched at the word homeless, hugging the twins tighter. Damian noted the reaction. Emily kept pacing around the living room, running manicured fingers through her hair, muttering about cancellations, gossip pages, and how humiliating it would be to tell her influencer friends that her fiancé had lost everything. She never once asked how he was feeling, never asked if the boys would be okay. Never once looked at Rosa to acknowledge the terror she had caused minutes earlier. Instead, Emily's every thought revolved around herself, her social standing, her image, her future. Damian let her rant for several minutes. When she finally stopped to catch her breath, he spoke again, voice low and wary. We need to leave here. By tonight, they're resending officers in the morning to seize valuables. Emily stared at him as though he had suggested living under a freeway bridge. Leave Beverly Hills. Go where? Damian swallowed slowly. East Los Angeles. There's an old apartment my grandfather left behind. It's small, outdated, but it's the only property not tied to my name. We'll stay there while I figure things out. The silence that followed felt like a slap in itself. Emily looked as if someone had told her she needed to drink sewer water. Eastla. She repeated as if saying the words might infect her. You expect me to live in some rundown, crime-infested dump because you messed up? Absolutely not. I'm not going anywhere. I'll stay with friends or book a hotel. Damian lifted his gaze, tired but firm. We can't afford a hotel, not even for one night. The horror returned to her face. Then you go, she spat. Take your kids and your nanny and your tragedy somewhere else, because I am not stepping foot in whatever slum you're talking about. Rosa inhaled sharply, the insult stinging even her. The twins looked between the adults, confused and frightened. Damian rubbed his face with both hands, giving Emily one last chance to show something anything other than selfishness. I need you with me, he said softly, truth hidden beneath the performance. We're a family. Families stay together during the hard times. Emily stared at him long and hard, weighing her options. She wasn't moved, she was calculating. If she left now, the story would ruin her. She would look heartless, opportunistic, shallow. But if she stayed for a short time, pretended to support him while planning her escape, she could salvage her image and possibly profit later. Damian saw the decision form behind her eyes even before she spoke. She plastered on a fragile smile. Fine, I'll go. But only because abandoning you right now would make me look awful. Don't expect me to enjoy it. And don't expect me to stay long if things don't improve. Damian nodded, keeping the H off his face. He had his answer. He had seen the truth. And as he looked at Rosa, who held the boys with genuine concern, who didn't once think of leaving despite knowing she would no longer be paid, he also saw something he hadn't expected: the contrast between gold-plated loyalty and real loyalty. Emily's decision told him everything he needed to know. Rosa's presence told him everything he didn't want to lose. And this was only the beginning. Emily's panic sharpened into something uglier the moment she realized Damian's downfall wasn't a temporary inconvenience, it was a permanent stain on the luxurious future she had been building in her mind. The split-second shock that had frozen her face began to twist into irritation, then contempt, and finally something close to disgust. To her, poverty wasn't a circumstance, it was a disease, and she now believed Damian had infected her with it. Standing in the living room of a mansion she had only recently considered her own, she looked at him not with empathy but with fury, as if his financial collapse were a personal insult designed to ruin her life. What am I supposed to tell everyone? She demanded, pacing in her stilettos, the sound sharp against the marble. What do you expect me to say? That my billionaire fiancé went broke overnight? That I'm suddenly homeless? Do you have any idea how humiliating that is? She spoke as though humiliation were a greater tragedy than betrayal or hardship. Damian watched her closely, exhaustion etched into every line of his face, though most of it was carefully crafted for the role he was playing. He let out a long, weary breath, sinking deeper into the sofa, embodying a man crushed by circumstances beyond repair. But inside he wasn't collapsing, not yet. He was observing, storing every reaction, every flash of selfishness, every refusal to care for the two little boys who were now huddled in Rosa's arms. Rosa's expression remained soft, though worry glimmered in her eyes. Unlike Emily, she didn't treat Damian's downfall as an inconvenience, it was a tragedy she instinctively felt concerned about. She shifted the twins' weight on her hips, keeping them close while whispering to them that everything would be okay, even though she herself wasn't sure how. Rosa knew what losing everything felt like. She had lived most of her childhood watching her family scrape by, saving every penny, praying for steady work. But hardship for her had never erased compassion. It had carved out her empathy, piece by piece, giving her a strength Emily had never possessed. Emily, meanwhile, didn't spare the kids so much as a glance. "We were supposed to be photographed tonight," she said through gritted teeth. "Do you understand how important that gala was? My publicist has spent weeks setting everything up. This is catastrophic for my brand. How could you be this reckless?" Damian looked up at her, eyes hollow but focused. "Emily, we losing the house, the cars, everything." "I'm not worried about galas right now," Emily scoffed dramatically, as if he were being absurd for prioritizing survival over social events. "Well, maybe you should be. Because once people find out what happened, you'll be a laughingstock and I'll be dragged right down with you." Her voice dropped to a hiss, dripping with resentment. "Do you know what people will say? That I was stupid enough to get engaged to a man who can't even hold on to his own fortune." Damian's jaw tightened, not from the insult but from the confirmation he'd expected. "So that's what matters to you?" he asked quietly. "Not the boydus, just how this looks." Emily didn't hesitate. "Yes, obviously. What else is there? If you don't have money, you don't have anything. That's just reality, Damian. Your kids will grow up and learn the same thing someday." Her words sliced through the room like a blade. Rosa shifted uncomfortably, holding Leo and Mason protectively. Damian caught the way she stiffened, and something inside him twisted. Emily's complete emotional detachment from the children was no longer a suspicion, it was fact. And he needed to know how deeply that selfishness ran. That was the entire purpose of this test. Emily crossed her arms, glaring at him. "I need to know exactly what I'm dealing with. How long before you fix this?" "There's nothing to fix," Damian replied. "It's gone, all of it. The bank, the investors, they've taken everything. I can't reverse it. We need to accept what's happening." Emily stared at him, her expression morphing from anger to disbelief to open hostility. "No, I don't accept this. I didn't sign up for this kind of life. I worked too hard to get where I am. And now I'm supposed to throw it all away just because you suddenly forgot how to manage your empire." Her voice rose sharp and cold. The boys whimpered at the noise, burying their faces into Rosa's shoulders. Rosa gently rocked them, whispering to them not to be scared. But her eyes flicked to Damian, quietly pleading for him to shield the children from this storm. Damian stood slowly, shoulders hunched as he kept up the appearance of a defeated man. "Emily, I'm asking you one more time, can you be with me through this?" "Through the worst," she exhaled sharply, annoyed. "I don't know. I need time to think. This is a lot to take in." It wasn't the answer of a devoted partner. It was the answer of someone evaluating an investment gone bad. And Damian knew that if he didn't push harder, if he didn't force the situation into uncomfortable territory, he wouldn't get the full truth. "We have to move tonight," he said, "right now. I bought an old car from one of the landscaping crew. It's all we have left. We will need to pack whatever we can carry." Emily stared at him, horrified. "Are you insane? I'm not getting into some filthy gardener car, absolutely not. And I'm not going with you to some broken down apartment like a character in a depressing indie movie. I would rather sleep in the driveway." Rosa's breath caught at the cruelty of the words, but she didn't speak. Damian forced himself to appear patient, reminding himself of the purpose behind every painful moment. "Emily, if you stay here, you'll be trespassing after tomorrow morning. The bank will take possession. You can't remain in the house." "Watch me," she snapped. "I'll deal with it. You're not dragging me into whatever disaster you created for yourself." Damian looked at her closely, really seeing her now without illusions. In his mind, one truth crystallized: a person who only stands next to you in the light is not someone who deserves you in the dark. He turned to Rosa, who met his gaze with quiet understanding. Even unpaid, uncertain, frightened of what the future looked like, she never once considered abandoning the twins. Even now she held them tighter, reassuring them with a warmth that money couldn't counterfeit. Emily threw her hands in the air, furious. "You were ruining everything. Absolutely everything. Do you hear me? I didn't come this far just to play housemaid in East La." Rosa's eyes flashed at the insult, but she remained steady. Damian breathed in, shoulders sagging, letting the weight of the moment settle. "Emily," he said, voice low, "I think everything is already ruined. And I think you've made it very clear what matters to you." His words landed with the force of a final verdict. Emily's face contorted in anger, but she didn't argue, not because she accepted anything he said, but because she was already planning her next move, calculating how to escape the fallout with minimal damage to her image. Damian saw the shift in her eyes, and he finally had the answer he needed. The decision to leave the mansion that night marked a turning point Damian had anticipated. But nothing could prepare him for how sharply the contrast between the two women in his life would unfold. Once the reality settled in that they were truly leaving Beverly Hills behind, Emily erupted into a frantic frenzy that had nothing to do with survival or practicality. She wasn't packing essentials. She wasn't thinking of food, warmth, or the twins' comfort. Instead, Damian found her in the master bedroom surrounded by an avalanche of designer dresses, jewelry cases thrown open like treasure chests, and luxury handbags scattered across the bed as if she were ransacking a store rather than preparing for a life-altering transition. He stood in the doorway, watching her toss diamond bracelets, limited edition heels, and velvet boxes into 3 oversized Louis Vuitton suitcases. "Emily," he said softly, "we can only take what fits in the car: clothes, food, basic things." She didn't even turn around. "These are basic things," she snapped while stuffing a sequin gown into a bag with force. "Do you have any idea how much this cost? I'm not leaving it behind just because you blew up our lives." Damian rubbed the bridge of his nose, fighting the urge to drop the defeated act and confront her with the authority he once held. "This isn't about what things cost," he said patiently. "It's about survival." She spun toward him with eyes flashing. "Survival, please." "We were not going to the jungle, Damian. We were going to some disgusting apartment you dug up from your family's past mistakes. I need at least some of my things. You can't expect me to show up looking like a charity case." Her voice grated against him, pitching higher with every complaint. Rosa, meanwhile, moved quietly through the hallway behind him, carrying 2 backpacks she'd packed for the twins' diapers, wipes, warm clothes, stuffed animals. Practical things, necessary things. She paused at the sight of Emily and looked up at Damian, waiting for direction. Damian only nodded for her to continue what she was doing. He couldn't control Emily, but he could rely on Rosa. 30 frantic minutes passed with Emily flinging designer items into bags while complaining about everything she'd lose at her wardrobe. Her influencer partnerships, her social standing. Damian felt exhausted just listening to her spiral, but exhaustion was the mask he needed to wear. The test wasn't over, not yet, and Emily hadn't even reached her worst. When he returned upstairs after helping Rosa load the twins' belongings into the old sedan, he found Emily clutching a velvet jewelry roll full of diamonds. "Emily," he warned gently, "you can't bring those." She clutched them tighter. "Watch me, I'm not leaving my future behind." Damian's expression tightened. "Those items are inventoried by the bank. If anyone catches us with them, you could be charged with hiding assets." She rolled her eyes. "No one's going to check, and even if they do, they won't arrest me. I'm not stupid, Damian." She turned away, her hands trembling slightly, not from fear, but from greed. She was calculating what these diamonds could buy her: a plane ticket, a hotel room, a new life far from the mess she believed he'd created. Damian saw the moment that thought crossed her mind. Her face lit with a cold kind of resolve. "Actually," she said slowly, "maybe I don't even have to go with you. Maybe I could just get away for a bit." That was the opening he needed to push her further. "If you run now," he said quietly, "the media will rip you apart." She froze. She knew he was right. A fiancée abandoning her partner during financial ruin, the internet would feast on it. Still, her frustration boiled over. Growling in anger, she threw the jewelry roll onto the bed, snatched a smaller selection of valuables, and stuffed them into her purse. Damian pretended not to notice. Downstairs, while Emily continued packing, Rosa worked tirelessly. She had stripped the boys' beds, folded their blankets, filled water bottles, and collected snacks from the pantry. She moved with a calmness that didn't match the chaos unraveling around her, determined not to let the boys feel the storm their father had manufactured. Every decision Rosa made came from instinct, compassion, and practicality. She didn't ask if Damian still planned to pay her. She didn't ask where she would sleep. Her focus was entirely on the twins and the man who employed her, even if his world had supposedly fallen apart. When all the bags were finally piled by the door, Damian found Emily standing in the foyer with her suitcase towers and her arms crossed. "I'm not riding in that car," she announced as if making a proclamation. "It's dirty, it smells like motor oil, and it's embarrassing." Damian forced himself to stay composed. "It's the only vehicle we have left," Emily scoffed. "No, I refuse. I'll call a rideshare." "We can't afford one," Damian reminded her, "and the cards won't go through anyway." Emily stared at him in disbelief, as though the idea of being unable to pay for a luxury ride was more devastating than losing the home behind them. Rosa, holding both boys' hands, stepped past them and gently guided the children toward the car without saying a word. She wiped dust off the back seat with her sleeve before buckling the twins in. When she climbed in between them to keep them safe, she didn't complain. She didn't hesitate. She simply did what needed to be done. Emily finally stomped out of the mansion, muttering curses under her breath. She shoved her designer luggage into the back seat until Rosa had to reorganize everything to prevent the door from bouncing open again. When Emily lowered herself into the passenger seat, she lifted her coat like a barrier between her and the upholstery. "This whole thing is ridiculous," she hissed. "I hope you realize how much you're ruining my life." The drive from Beverly Hills to East Los Angeles felt longer than the miles between the two places. With every block they passed, the glamour Emily clung to slipped further from sight. Towering palm trees gave way to cracked sidewalks. Designer storefronts morphed into corner markets with flickering signs. And the deeper they traveled into East La, the stronger the tension grew in the car. Emily's disgust, Rosa's quiet determination, Damian's internal calculations. By the time they pulled up to the old apartment complex, its walls faded, the metal railings rusted. Laundry hanging from balconies like flags of resilience. Emily's jaw had dropped open in horror. "You were kidding," she whispered. "Tell me this is a joke. Tell me we're not staying here." Her voice trembled, not from fear but from fury. Damian put the car in park. "This is home now," he said. "At least for a while." Emily didn't move, didn't speak. She simply stared at the chipped paint and broken steps as though they were physical insults directed at her personally. Rosa unbuckled the twins with gentle hands, lifting them from the car and whispering that everything would be all right. Damian carried the bags inside, feeling the weight of the test tightening around him. Because now, more than ever, the difference between the two women was undeniable. And the choice he would eventually have to make was becoming painfully clear. The apartment in East Los Angeles felt like a punch to the chest the moment they stepped inside. The air was thick and stale, tinged with the dampness of a place long forgotten. A single overhead bulb flickered weakly, illuminating dust particles that drift through the room like tiny ghosts of neglect. The linoleum floor was cracked, the walls stained from years of humidity and poor ventilation, and somewhere in the distance, a dog barked with the sharp desperation of the neighborhood. To Emily, it might as well have been a horror film set. To Rosa, it was simply a challenge she accepted with quiet resolve. To Damian, it was the perfect proving ground for his test. Emily remained rooted near the doorway, holding her purse up as though the room itself might contaminate her. "Absolutely not," she declared, backing away from a peeling patch of wall. "This is unlivable. This is worse than those abandoned buildings people post on urban exploration videos. I'm not staying here." Her voice cracked with disgust, but Damian did not indulge her outrage. He set down the bags and surveyed the room with a wary sigh, keeping up the facade of financial ruin. "It's all we have," he said. "We need to make it work." Rosa didn't complain. She set down the boys' backpacks and walked deeper into the apartment, examining each corner the way only someone who has lived through hardship knows how. She quickly assessed what could be fixed, what needed to be cleaned, what could be made comfortable for the children. Then she returned to Damian with a small, reassuring nod. "We can make this safe for them," she said. "It just needs work." Her attitude alone brightened the dim room more than the flickering bulb. Emily rolled her eyes dramatically. "Safe, Rosa, this place has mold. Do you want the kids to grow mushrooms in their lungs? And oh my God, is that a bug?" She leapt back as a tiny cockroach scurried across the wall and disappeared behind the refrigerator. "No. I can't. This is beneath me. This is beneath all of us." Rosa looked at her calmly, though her patience was clearly being tested. "Children don't need luxury," she replied softly. "They need care, they need stability. We can give them that no matter where we are." Emily laughed, a sharp, humorless sound. "Stability, in this dump." She stomped toward the cracked window and pointed outside. "Look at this neighborhood. People are literally hanging clothes from the balcony like some third world movie scene. And you expect me to believe children can thrive here? Damian, what are you thinking?" She tossed her hair over her shoulder as though the weight of the entire situation fell solely on her fragile shoulders. But Damian wasn't listening to her anymore, not really. His gaze had shifted to Rosa, who had already found an old broom and begun sweeping the floor. Her cheeks still bore the faint redness from Emily's earlier slap, but she didn't pause to touch it or dwell on it. Instead, she worked with steady, purposeful motions, clearing away debris as the twins followed her, curious but comforted by her presence. Leo clung to her leg while Mason tugged at her sleeve, asking softly if the apartment had monsters. Rosa smiled and crouched down to reassure him. "No monsters here," she said gently, "just shadows we will brighten up." Her words struck Damian in a way he hadn't expected. Emily could buy chandeliers worth thousands of dollars, but she couldn't soften a child's heart the way Rosa just had with a few comforting words. Emily continued pacing the room like a caged animal. "Damian, you have to fix this. You have to call someone, a lawyer, an investor."
"A friend of the yak, someone?"
She clapped her hands as if trying to wake him from a dream. "We cannot live here. We can," he answered simply. "People do." She recoiled. "Well, I'm not people, Damian. I'm not built for poverty. I don't even know how to function without hot lats and reliable plumbing. Rosa paused from sweeping, her expression softening with sympathy not for Emily, but for Damian, who bore the brunt of her cruelty. She set a small hand on Leo's head and whispered a quiet instruction for him to stay near her. Then she crossed to Damian. "Let me start on the kids' room," she said quietly. "It'll feel more like home once their things are set up." He nodded, grateful. Within minutes, Rosa transformed the smallest bedroom into something resembling comfort. She wiped down the dusty floor, shook out an old curtain she found in a cabinet, folded it into layers, and turned it into a makeshift sleeping mat for the twins. She laid their blankets over it, placed their plush toys beside the pillows, and murmured soft encouragements as she worked. The boys watched her with wide eyes, stunned that someone could make something so ugly feel safe so quickly. Emily, meanwhile, hovered uselessly near the front door. Not once did she offer to help lift a bag or check on the children. She scrolled through her phone, desperately trying to find enough signal to post on social media. She wanted sympathy, outrage, maybe even a viral moment. Anything that validated her suffering. But the cracked walls of the apartment felt like a cage blocking her from the glamorous digital stage she needed to survive. "You can't expect me to sleep here," she muttered. "This couch looks like it came from a dumpster." "It probably did," Damian said. Emily shot him a look. "How can you joke right now?" "I'm not joking," he answered, his tone exhausted. Rosa returned from the children's room and stood near the doorway, her hands clasped in front of her. "Dinner is going to be simple tonight," she said, her voice gentle. "I found some things in the pantry. Enough for sandwiches, maybe some soup." "The boys are hungry." Emily wrinkled her nose at the idea of eating anything that didn't come from a chef or a delivery service. "Great, starving in a slum, exactly the life I envisioned with you, Damian." Rosa's patience finally cracked just a little. "It's not a slum," she said firmly. "It's a home. It's what we have. And children don't need more than that," Emily scoffed. "Easy for you to say. You were used to this." Damian's heart tightened at the insult directed at Rosa. Even so, Rosa remained composed. "Used to struggle doesn't mean I enjoy it," she said. "But I know how to make difficult things work. I know how to survive without complaining." Emily's cheeks flushed with indignation, as though Rosa had personally attacked her when all Rosa had done was speak truth. As the boys crawled into their makeshift bed, clutching their toys and yawning despite the unfamiliar surroundings, Damian watched Rosa tuck them in. She brushed their hair back, whispered a story, and kissed their foreheads with the tenderness of someone who understood loss, fear, and resilience. Emily watched from the doorway, arms crossed, rolling her eyes as if the scene offended her. In that moment, Damian felt the full weight of the test settle into place. Emily was exposing her true nature with every word she spoke. Rosa was revealing hers with every quiet act of kindness. The contrast between the two women had never been clearer, and Damian, for the first time since his plan began, felt both heartbreak and relief. Because now he knew with undeniable certainty who would stay with him in the flames and who had only ever been there for the firelight. The first full day in the East Lell apartment began before sunrise, though none of them had truly slept. The cramped space carried every sound: the heavy footsteps from the floor above, the distant rumble of early buses, the muffled arguments from a neighboring unit. Damian had lain awake on the worn-out couch, staring at the ceiling and thinking about the weight of his own test. He already knew Emily was failing spectacularly, but he needed to see how far she would go when pushed. Would she crack completely? Would she abandon him outright? Or would she reveal a darker side he hadn't yet witnessed? Rosa, who had slept on the floor beside the twins, was already awake when Damian checked on them. She had risen quietly, smoothing her uniform and gently brushing Mason's hair as he slept curled against his brother. Her exhaustion showed in the shadows beneath her eyes, but her expression remained steady. When she looked up and saw Damian in the doorway, she offered him a faint but genuine smile. "They rewarm," she whispered. "That's what matters." Damian nodded, heart tightening. Emily could spend thousands on superficial comforts, yet it was Rosa, armed with nothing but resourcefulness and heart, who created real security for his children. Emily, on the other hand, was sprawled on the couch's one usable cushion, wrapped in a fox fur coat she'd insisted on bringing. Her mascara had smudged from the night before, but she refused to admit the exhaustion. Instead, the first thing she did when she opened her eyes was complain. "My back is destroyed," she groaned. "I can't believe you expect me to sleep on furniture that should have been burned a decade ago. Damian, I need a chiropractor. My spine is practically bent." She pushed herself up dramatically and glanced around the room in disgust. "This place looks even worse in daylight." Damian ignored the sting of her words and started preparing a small breakfast from the limited pantry items. Rosa helped without needing to be asked. She boiled water on the old electric coil stove, checked the expiration dates on canned goods, and warmed a pan of oatmeal that was more lumps than smooth texture. But she made it work. She always made things work. Emily watched this with growing irritation, as if offended by Rosa's competence. She muttered, fanning the air. What is that smell? Please don't tell me we're eating whatever that is. It's food, Rosa said gently. The boys need something in their stomachs. Emily scrunched her nose. Well, they can have mine. I'll wait for something edible. When breakfast was ready, Leo and Mason sat cross-legged on the floor, eating from the mismatched plastic bowls Rosa had cleaned the night before. They slurped the warm oatmeal enthusiastically, grateful for anything familiar. Emily refused to join them, sitting apart with her arms crossed, tapping angrily on her phone and muttering about the terrible Wi-Fi. Damian set a bowl in front of her anyway. She pushed it away with a theatrical sniff. Damian, I said no. I can't live like this, you can, he murmured. You just won't. Emily threw him a glare sharp enough to cut glass. Don't twist my words, I'm not built for poverty. This isn't normal. Rosa looked from helping Mason scrape the last bits from his bowl. It's normal for a lot of people, she gently corrected. Hard doesn't mean impossible. Emily rolled her eyes. Spare me the motivational speech. Not all of us were raised to deal with this kind of lifestyle. Rosa's cheeks flushed, but she kept calm. Struggle isn't a lifestyle, it's a chapter. It ends when you outgrow it. Emily let out a humorless laugh. And do you think Damian is going to outgrow this? Because I don't. That sentence hit Damian harder than she realized. Not because he doubted his ability to rebuild, he had more hidden safety nets than Emily could imagine, but because she had revealed her truth with brutal clarity. She didn't believe in him. She believed in what he could provide. Later in the morning, the twins grew restless and began playing with the only toy they had, a small plastic fire truck Rosa had stuffed into their bag before leaving Beverly Hills. The wheels squeaked loudly on the damaged linoleum, their laughter echoing in the small room. Emily groaned every time they bumped into a wall or accidentally tapped her leg with it. Can you keep them quiet? She snapped. I'm trying to answer emails. They read children, Rosa said, her tone calm but firm. They need to play. Emily scoffed. Not like that. That noise is giving me a migraine. Damian had been waiting for this moment. Emily, he said evenly, how about you entertain them for a bit? They need attention. Her eyes widened, scandalized by the suggestion. Me, I'm not out to do that. That's what she's for. She jerked her chin toward Rosa. Damian's jaw tightened. Rosa has been doing everything since last night. It won't hurt you to help. Emily stared at him like he'd asked her to mop the entire building. I'm not wasting my time babysitting. If you can't afford staff anymore, then you should be planned better. Rosa lifted the fire truck from Mason's hands and gently rolled it across the floor toward Emily. Maybe they just want you to try, she said softly. Emily recoiled as though the toy were contaminated. Get that thing away from me. Leo watched her with confusion, his smile fading. No play, he asked softly. Emily didn't answer. She turned away, pretending she hadn't heard. And that, Damian realized, was the moment Leo learned that not all adults who claim to love you actually do. Rosa noticed Leo's hurt expression and quickly scooped him onto her lap, kissing the top of his head. It's okay, sweetheart, she whispered. I'll play with you. Damian felt something burn in his chest, not anger, not disappointment, something deeper. The kind of realization that changes everything. Hours passed and Emily's complaints increased in frequency and volume. She hated the heat, she hated the noise, she hated the lack of amenities. And she especially hated that Rosa kept stepping into the role of family while she merely occupied space. When Rosa began preparing lunch using whatever she could find, a can of beans, a handful of rice, and seasoning packets, Emily stared in disbelief. You actually know how to cook that, how quaint. Rosa ignored the insult and kept steering. I'm making enough for all of us, she said politely. Not for me, Emily insisted. I'm not eating that prison food. When lunchtime came, the twins devoured the meal gratefully. Damian ate too, though it tasted like nothing he'd ever been served in his former penthouse life. Not because the food was bad, but because something about the moment grounded him in a way he hadn't expected. It humbled him. It reminded him of what mattered. Family, kindness, truth. Emily stood apart with arms crossed, stomach growling loud enough for all to hear. Instead of accepting food, she lashed out. I can't take this anymore. The noise, the smell, the ugliness. Damian, this has to end. I'm not living this nightmare another day. Fix it. Damian calmly set his bowl down. There is nothing to fix, he said. This is our reality now. Emily's face twisted with rage. Well, not I'm done pretending. If you think I'm going to be trapped here with 2 screaming kids and your maid nanny, Rosa corrected gently. Emily snapped at her. Whatever. Damian stared at her long and hard. He wanted her to show even a spark of humanity. Instead, she showed her teeth. The contrast between her selfishness and Rosa's quiet devotion had never been more vivid. And Damian knew, more than ever, that this chapter needed to continue because Emily's true breaking point was still coming, and Rosa's strength had only just begun to show. By late afternoon, the heat in the small East Leigh apartment had thickened into something heavy and suffocating. The box fan near the window rattled so loudly it sounded like it might fall apart at any moment, and the thin curtains barely moved despite the constant breeze from outside. Damian had hoped the day would settle into some kind of rhythm, but Emily's temper only escalated with every passing hour. Her patience, already fragile, was now stretched to the breaking point, and anything, no matter how small, triggered another round of complaints. Rosa did her best to keep the apartment running smoothly. She swept again, wiped down counters, reorganized the small pantry, and kept the twins entertained with simple games, stacking plastic cups, pretending the fire truck was a real emergency vehicle, even teaching them to count using beans from the dried rice container. Everything she did was gentle, thoughtful, and almost invisible, yet essential. She blended into the background, but if she weren't there, the entire atmosphere would crumble instantly. Emily, meanwhile, hovered like a storm cloud. She couldn't sit still, she couldn't stand the heat. She couldn't tolerate the noise from the street. Her nerves were stretched thin, and her resentment toward Rosa, who seemed to adapt effortlessly, grew by the minute. She paced the narrow kitchen, fanning her face dramatically with a magazine she'd stuffed into her purse earlier. "I'm sweating," she declared with horror. "Actually sweating. This is barbaric. Damian, do something." He glanced up from the twins, who were building a tower out of old cardboard boxes. "There's nothing to do," he replied simply. "The if hasn't worked in years." Emily gasped as if he'd just confessed to a crime. "Well, that's unacceptable. I can't live in a place without AC. I'm not built for this kind of existence." Rosa looked over from where she was wiping the kitchen counter and offered a small, kind smile. "You can open the window," she suggested. "Sometimes the breeze is stronger in the afternoon." Emily responded with a glare. "I'm not sticking my head out into that street. Who knows what kind of people live here, and I'm certainly not opening myself to mosquitoes or whatever else is flying around." Her paranoia only fueled her bitterness, and her bitterness fueled her hostility. Damian could see the shift happening slowly at first, then with increasing intensity. Emily wasn't just uncomfortable now. She was slipping into a mindset where everything and everyone became the enemy. And Rosa, simply for existing in this space with grace and competence, became her biggest threat. It didn't help that the twins adored Rosa more with each passing moment. They clung to her shirt, tugged at her hands, rested their heads on her lap. When they cried, they wanted her. When they were hungry, they called her name. Emily resented it deeply, even though she had done nothing to earn their affection. "Why do they always run to you?" she snapped at one point, unable to mask her jealousy. Rosa paused, confused by the question. "Because I'm here with them," she answered softly. "Because they know I'll take care of them." Emily scoffed. "So what? That makes you some kind of saint?" Rosa shook her head. "No, it just makes me responsible." That single sentence lodged itself under Emily's skin like a thorn. She hated the implication that responsibility was something she lacked, especially coming from someone she saw as beneath her. She crossed her arms, sneering. "Well, congratulations, you win the Nanny of the Year award. Maybe they should call you Mommy while they re-at it." Her tone was dripping with sarcasm, but the moment she said it, the room froze. Rosa didn't react angrily. She simply stiffened, her expression unreadable, and returned to drying the dishes. The twins looked up, confused by the sudden tension. Damian stepped forward. "Enough," he said quietly, but with authority. Emily rolled her eyes. "Oh, please. She acts like she's the martyr of the century. Someone has to tell her she's overstepping." Damian took a breath, steadying himself. "She's not overstepping. She's doing what needs to be done, what you won't do." Emily's jaw clenched. "Excuse me." Rosa turned quickly, stepping between them with gentle firmness. "Please don't argue," she whispered, "not in front of the boys." Emily's eyes flashed. "Don't tell me what to do." "I'm not," Rosa said. "I'm just thinking of them." Emily scoffed again, her favorite defense. "You always are, aren't you? Acting like the perfect little hero." Before Rosa could respond, the twins ran to her again, holding up the fire truck. "Play." They shouted excitedly. She bent down, smiling. Okay, one at a time." Emily watched the scene with growing envy and something darker, resentment that bordered on hatred. These children were supposed to be her ticket into a life she'd always wanted. A perfect wealthy family, a future of privilege. Yet they ran to Rosa, the nanny, as though she were the center of their universe. Damian sat beside Rosa on the floor, joining the boys in their game. It was innocent and simple, but the sight made Emily furious. Watching them bond, Watching Rosa laugh with the boys while Damian looked at her with gratitude, it sparked something inside Emily that had nothing to do with fear or discomfort. This was jealousy, real raw jealousy, the kind that twisted her insides. "So that's it," she said suddenly. "The nanny gets the husband and the kids while I get stuck in this nightmare." Damian looked up sharply. "What did you just say?" "You heard me," she snapped. "I'm here suffering while she plays house with your children. And don't pretend you don't see it." You were practically glued to her. Rosa stood immediately, face pale. "Emily, that's not true. I'm just what?" Emily shot back. "Just making me look bad. Just showing off how perfect you are. You think you're better than me because you can survive in this trash heap." Rosa stepped away, tensing as though bracing for impact. "I'm not competing with you," she whispered. "I'm helping." But Emily wasn't listening anymore. Her jealousy had clouded her judgment entirely. She stepped closer to Rosa, pointing a finger at her like a weapon. "I see what you redoing. I see how you trying to turn them against me. You want Damian to think you some kind of angel so he'll trust you more than he trusts me." Damian stepped between them before the situation escalated further. "Emily, stop. You're reimagining things." "Am I?" she demanded. "Or is this your perfect little setup? Poor Damian, his poor kids with his poor nanny, all struggling together in this dump. Maybe I'm just the extra piece you don't need anymore." Her words were sharp, but the truth behind them was accidental. She was the extra piece. Rosa was the foundation holding everything together. And deep down, Emily feared that Damian was beginning to see it too. She wasn't wrong. Because Damian, standing between Emily's fury and Rosa's trembling form, realized something undeniable. Rosa wasn't just loyal, she was irreplaceable. Emily felt it, and that fear, that insecurity, was beginning to turn her dangerous. Night crept into East Los Angeles with a weight heavier than the heat that had suffocated the apartment earlier. Dark clouds rolled in from the west, swallowing the remaining light behind them, and thunder murmured faintly in the distance. The old building groaned as a gust of wind rattled the loose metal railing outside. Damian had been watching the weather shift for hours, sensing that the approaching storm wasn't just atmospheric. Something inside the apartment was ready to break too. He could feel it tightening like a knot in his chest. The twins had grown fussy as the evening progressed. Perhaps the air pressure unsettled them, or maybe it was the constant tension radiating from Emily. Even Rosa, who never showed fear around the boys, kept glancing out the window between tasks, her brow creasing more each time lightning flashed on the horizon. The storm reminded her of nights from her childhood, nights spent in rundown apartments not so different from this one, where thunder echoed through thin walls and rain seeped in through broken window frames. She had learned courage early in life, but storms still woke old memories. Emily, meanwhile, was in no mood for weather or emotions. She had grown increasingly anxious since sunset, pacing the apartment like a trapped cat. Her phone battery had died hours earlier, cutting her off from the digital world that validated her existence. She kept trying to restart it, slapping the screen with the palm of her hand, muttering curses under her breath. When the device refused to turn on, she let out a frustrated scream that startled the twins.
"Oh, come on!"
She yelled. "Why does everything in this miserable place have to go wrong? I swear it's like this apartment is cursed." Damian looked up from the stove, where he was stirring a pot of simple vegetable soup Rosa had assembled before tending to the children. "It's old," he said. "Most things don't work well anymore." Emily shot him a glare. "Yeah, well, neither does my life right now." Before Damian could respond, a crack of thunder split the air, shaking the windows. The lights flickered once, twice, then died completely. The apartment fell into a thick darkness so sudden that even Rosa gasped. The twins immediately burst into tears. Mason reached for his brother, and Leo clung to Rosa's legs. Rosa knelt quickly, gathering both children into her arms with calm urgency. "It's okay," she whispered. "I'm right here. We're okay." But Emily wasn't calm. She shrieked loud enough for the floorboards to vibrate.
"Damia!
Fix it! Fix it now! I can't be in the dark in this awful place." She stumbled across the room, bumping into a chair, then tripped over one of her own suitcases. Why is everything a disaster? Why can't anything just work for once? Damian lit a candle quickly, its soft glow illuminating the room enough to reveal Emily's wild expression. Her hair was disheveled, her breathing erratic and her eyes wide with panic. Fear had stripped away whatever composure she had left. "Emily," he said, voice low but steady, "calm down. It's just a power outage. She snapped. Damian, I am not living like this. I didn't leave Beverly Hills to be trapped in a blackout with screaming kids and your pet nanny." Rosa stiffened, holding the twins tighter. She didn't respond, not because she was afraid, but because the boys needed her to stay centered. Damian stepped forward, placing the candle on a small table. Emily, enough, you re-scaring them. She pointed at Rosa, ignoring him completely. Why are they always clinging to her? Why don't they want me? Rosa finally spoke, her voice soft but firm. They re-scared. They need comfort. Emily scoffed. Comfort? What about me? Doesn't anyone care that I'm scared? Damian watched her carefully. Something about her tone wasn't just tantrum-level frustration anymore, it was tipping into instability. He lowered his voice. Emily, what do you want from me? Her answer came in a trembling whisper. I want my life back. Before he could reply, a flash of lightning illuminated the room like a camera flash, and at that exact moment, Mason let out a shrill cry, clutching his stomach. He curled into Rosa's lap, trembling violently. Leo followed, crying harder, tugging at Damian's shirt. Rosa pressed her hand to Mason's forehead and her heart dropped. He's burning, she said urgently. Damian, he's burning up. Everything shifted in an instant. Damian knelt beside them, fear slicing through his chest. Mason's skin radiated heat that shouldn't be possible. His breathing had gone shallow, his little fingers twitching. We need medicine, Rosa said quickly. Right now. Something to bring the fever down. Emily backed away as if the child were contagious. Oh God, is he sick? Seriously. This is the worst possible time for one of them to get sick.
Damian, do something.
Rosa ignored her. She looked Damian dead in the eyes. We don't have Tylenol. We don't have anything here. The bodega down the street might still be open, but with the storm thunder roared overhead, it's going to be dangerous. Damian glanced out the window. Rain had begun slamming against the glass in sheets. The wind howled like a living thing. The streetlights flickered, then went out, casting the entire block into near-complete darkness. I'll go, Damian said, rising, but Rosa's hand shot out and grabbed his arm. No, you need to stay with both of them. If Mason gets worse, Leo will panic. They need you here. She stood, gently transferring Mason into his father's arms. He whimpered, his skin blazing like fire. But Rosa, I'll run, she said. I'm faster. And I know how to move in these neighborhoods. I grew up in places like this. I can handle it.
Emily's jaw fell open. You can't go out there.
It's pouring.
You will get soaked.
And what if someone tries to rob you? Rosa didn't even look at her. The boy is burning, she repeated. That's all that matters. Damian swallowed hard. Take an umbrella at least. It'll slow me down, she said, already slipping on her shoes. She grabbed her wallet, though she knew she had almost nothing inside, and ran toward the door. Emily lunged forward. No. What if you don't come back? What if something happens and I'm stuck here with... She glanced at the feverish child with all of this. Rosa turned to her with a stare so piercing Emily took a step back. This isn't about you. Then she was gone into the storm, into the darkness, into danger without hesitation. Damian held Mason, rocking him as the little boy whimpered in pain. Leo's eyes filled with tears. Rosa, come back, he whispered. She will, Damian said, though his voice shook. She always comes back. Emily stood frozen, arms wrapped around herself, watching the door as though the storm had swallowed something she didn't understand. She's insane, she whispered. No one would run out in weather like that. Damian looked at her, really looked at her, and saw the truth. Emily wouldn't risk her comfort for anyone, not even a child. Rosa, who had no obligation beyond a paycheck she no longer had, ran into a storm for a boy who wasn't hers. And in that moment, Damian knew without question whose heart was real. The storm hammered against the windows, each gust of wind rattling the apartment like a warning. Damian held Mason close, feeling the frightening heat radiating off his small body. The boy whimpered in his arms, his eyelids fluttering with exhaustion and fever. Leo sat glued to his father's side, gripping his sleeve with tiny fists as if afraid he might be swept away next. The candle on the table flickered violently with every tremor of thunder, casting long, wavering shadows across the cramped living room. Damian tried to appear calm for the twins, but inside his chest panic glowed wildly. He trusted Rosa, but he also knew the neighborhood, the storm, the dangers lurking in dimly lit streets where desperation sometimes ran deeper than the floodwater forming along the curbs. And Rosa had run straight into it without looking back. Emily stood stiffly by the door, arms wrapped around herself as if she were the vulnerable one. Her expression flickered between fear and resentment. She wasn't worried for Rosa's safety, she was worried about being abandoned in a situation she didn't know how to handle. Damian, she said finally, her voice pitched with irritation more than concern. She's been gone a long time. It had been 8 minutes. 8 minutes of thunder rolling, wind howling, and Mason burning hotter with each passing second. Damian didn't answer. He rocked Mason gently, trying to cool him with a damp cloth, though the cloth warmed quickly against the fever. She'd better not get herself killed, Emily muttered. Then we'd really be screwed. Damian shot her a hard look. She turned away defensively. What, I'm just being realistic? This whole situation is insane. Who runs into a storm like that? Someone who cares, he said quietly. Emily's jaw tightened. You're acting like she's some kind of hero. She is, he said simply. Before Emily could retort, Mason let out a small cry, thin, strained, terrifying. His body twitched slightly, his breathing quickening. Damian's heart dropped. Daddy Lo whispered, eyes round with fear. Is Mason okay? Damian pulled him closer. He will be, he said, praying. His voice sounded steadier than he felt. Rosa's coming back with medicine. She always keeps her word. Another crash of thunder shook the building and lightning illuminated the room in a ghostly flash. Emily flinched dramatically. This is ridiculous. What if the store was closed? What if she slipped? What if some gang? Damian cut her off sharply. Stop. You re-scaring the children. Emily widened her eyes as if he were accusing her unjustly.
I'm scared too.
You re an adult, he said, act like one. Emily's face twisted, but she didn't respond. For the first time since supposed financial collapse began, she seemed genuinely unsure of her place in the situation. Rosa had stepped into danger and Damian had stepped into fatherhood, grounding himself with instinct and purpose. Emily had stepped nowhere. She floated in self-pity, refusing to anchor to anything real. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours. The wind roared like a beast outside, rustling debris across the metal fire escape. Damian stared at the door, silently begging for it to open. His imagination tormented him with images of Rosa slipping on wet pavement, being struck by a falling branch, being confronted by someone desperate enough to take advantage of the storm. He had underestimated how deeply she had entwined herself into his family, how vital she had become not only to his children but to him. Just as he stood up, ready to run into the storm himself despite everything he'd told her, something scraped against the outside hallway. A second later, the apartment door shoved open. Rosa stumbled inside, drenched from head to toe, rain dripping from her hair and coat, her breath heaving. Her arms shook violently as she clutched a small plastic bag to her chest. Damian's knees nearly gave out from relief. Rosa, it's okay, she panted, closing the door behind her with trembling fingers. I got it. Water pooled at her feet as she crossed the room, pulling out the fever medicine and a bottle of electrolyte drink. Her hands were shaking so badly that the cap slipped from her fingers twice before Damian reached over and steadied it for her. When they poured the syrup into the measuring cup, she cupped Mason's face gently, whispering soothing words. He swallowed the medicine weakly, his eyes unfocused. Damian helped him drink small sips of liquid while Rosa stroked his hair, murmuring encouragement. Emily watched from the far corner, her expression bewildered, almost offended by the intensity of the moment. You actually ran all the way there, she said, disbelief dripping from every syllable. Rosa didn't acknowledge her. She remained focused on Mason, counting his breaths, checking his temperature with the back of her hand, calming him with her presence alone. Finally, when Mason's breathing slowed and his body stopped twitching, Rosa let out a trembling sigh. Damian felt his eyes sting with something he hadn't allowed himself to feel in a long time: vulnerability, gratitude. A fierce, protective affection towards someone who had risked everything for his child. Thank you, he said softly. Rosa shook her head, wiping rainwater from her cheeks. He needed medicine, that's all. But Damian knew it wasn't all. A nanny wouldn't have done what she just did. A coworker wouldn't have. Even many mothers wouldn't have. Rosa had put herself in harm's way without hesitation, without expectation, without needing permission. Emily crossed her arms tightly. Well, great, he's fine now. Can we all relax? Her comment cut through the emotion like a jagged blade. Damian turned to her slowly. He wasn't fine. He could have had a seizure. He could have died. Emily shrugged one shoulder. Kids get fevers, it happens. Rosa's head snapped up, her eyes sharp with anger she had restrained all day. Not like that, she said. Not this high, and not in a place without electricity or running ac. He was in danger. Emily's expression hardened. Don't talk to me like I don't know anything. I'm not stupid. Nobody said you were, Damian said. But you didn't step forward when he needed help. Rosa did. Emily's cheeks flushed red, either from guilt or fury. Damian suspected the latter. I'm not the one who wanted kids anyway, she muttered under her breath, but loud enough for both adults to hear. Leo froze. Damian felt something inside him finally snap. He was about to confront her when Rosa gently tapped his arm. Not now, she whispered. The boys are awake. She was right. This wasn't the time. The storm still raged outside, and inside, Mason had begun to relax, his breathing deepening as the medicine took effect. Leo finally released Damian's sleeve and curled into Rosa's side, seeking comfort. Damian watched them, both the nanny and the child tucked into her lap, and something inside him shifted permanently. It was a moment of clarity, sharper than lightning, deeper than thunder. Emily saw a burden. Rosa saw a child. Emily saw inconvenience. Rosa saw life. And he had heard every word of Emily's phone call before the collapse, her resentment, her disgust, her lack of commitment. He knew then that the recording he had made wasn't just leverage, it was truth captured. Truth he needed to face. Truth he needed to act on. Emily, sensing the emotional current turning against her, crossed her arms defensively. Her expression flickered with something unsettled, fear of losing control. Fear of losing the image she held over Damian. Fear of losing Damian himself. And she should be afraid. Because the storm outside was beginning to quiet, but inside the apartment another storm, one far more powerful, had only just begun. The storm outside finally began to ease, though the apartment remained wrapped in a heavy, trembling stillness. The rain softened to a steady patter, the thunder faded into the distance, and the candle on the table burned low, casting a warm glow across the cramped room. But inside Damian the storm was only intensifying. Every emotion he had been suppressing, fear, anger, clarity, heartbreak, was rising, swirling, demanding resolution. Rosa sat on the floor with both twin nestled beside her, her damp clothes clinging to her skin. Her hair still dripping from her reckless run through the storm. Mason's fever had begun to drop, and Leo had finally stopped trembling. They leaned into Rosa as though she were the anchor of their world, the only place where safety felt guaranteed. Emily watched the scene with arms crossed, her jaw tight and her eyes burning with mixed resentment and something dangerously close to panic. She looked like someone witnessing the collapse of a carefully constructed illusion, an illusion she believed was her birthright. She had always imagined herself central in Damian's life, but now she saw, painfully and undeniably, that she didn't belong in the picture unfolding before her. Damian stood from the couch, moving to sit across from Rosa. The twins instantly looked up at him, seeking reassurance. He placed a gentle hand on Mason's back and brushed a thumb across Leo's cheek. The boys relaxed at his touch, and Rosa offered him a tired but warm smile. Her eyes were red from wind and rain, but soft with affection and relief. Emily's irritation snapped again. "Don't look at her like that," she said, her voice sharp enough to cut. Damian turned his head slowly, his expression calm but weighted. "Like what? Like she's the mother of your kids?" Rosa's breath caught. Damian straightened. And Emily instantly regretted saying it, because the truth of her words hung in the air like smoke neither of them could wave away. Damian took a deep breath and stood. "Emily, can I talk to you?" His tone held no anger, no panic, just finality. Emily stiffened. "Here." "Yes." Now, Rosa gently reminded the twins to stay in their room, guiding them through the doorway with quiet hands. When she glanced back at Damian, he gave her a reassuring nod. She disappeared behind the hallway, leaving him and Emily alone in the dimly lit living room. Emily forced a tight laugh. "Let me guess, this is where you apologize for all of this, for dragging me into this nightmare." Damian shook his head slowly. "No, this is where I tell you the truth." She frowned. "What truth?" He reached into his back pocket and pulled out his phone, a phone she thought had been disconnected, wiped, dead. He pressed play. Her own voice filled the room, harsh, venomous, calculating. $2 million, that's what I'll need to disappear from this mess. No, I don't care about the kids. They're not mine, they're his problem. Yes, take them. Give them to whoever wants them. I'm not wasting my youth raising someone else's brats. Emily froze, her face draining of color. "Damian, wait, I can explain." "Explain what?" he asked quietly. "Explain that you were willing to hand my children over to strangers, that you were negotiating money in exchange for leaving us." She stepped toward him, reaching for his arm, but he stepped back. "That was before." "I was upset. You don't understand how stressed I was." Damian's voice rose not with rage, but with hurt. "Upset doesn't make you trade children like they were property. Stress doesn't erase compassion. Fear doesn't erase love." Emily's lips trembled. "I didn't mean it." "You did," he cut in. "You meant every word." She tried again. "Damian, I was scared. I thought you were throwing your life away. I thought we'd lose everything." He met her eyes steadily. "We did lose everything. That was the point, to see who stayed." The truth hit her like a blow. "You tested me," she whispered. "You pretend to be broke to test me."
Yes, how could you?
She cried, stepping back in disbelief. "Do you have any idea how horrible that is?" Damian's voice hardened. "No more horrible than discovering the woman you planned to marry would abandon you the moment your money disappeared." Her eyes flashed with anger. "You set me up. You made me look like the villain." Damian shook his head. "You didn't need help looking like one." She gasped, insulted into silence. He continued, "This entire time Rosa stayed with us. She protected my children. She ran through a storm. She spent her last dollars to save a child who doesn't even share her blood. She showed loyalty when you showed greed. She showed courage when you showed fear. She showed love when he hesitated before finishing, when you showed nothing at all." Emily grabbed her coat defensively. "So what, you re-choosing her over me?" Damian exhaled deeply. "I'm choosing my children. And yes, I'm choosing the person who actually cares about them." Emily clenched her fists. I won't let you paint me as some monster. I didn't ask to be thrown into poverty. I didn't ask for any of this. No, Damian agreed. You just revealed exactly who you are when life stopped catering to you. She stared at him, cheeks flushing with fury and humiliation. What are you going to do? Kick me out? Leave me with nothing? Emily, he said calmly, you walked away from us the moment you tried to sell my children to the highest bidder. Her breath hitched, and for a moment she looked truly shaken. I made a mistake, she whispered. No, Damian corrected, you made a choice. Another silence settled heavy, final. Emily straightened her shoulders with false composure. Fine, if this is where you want to end things, I'll go. But don't expect me to keep your secrets. When people find out what you did pretending to lose everything, they'll see you unstable. Damian didn't flinch. Let them. I'd rather be seen as unstable than blind. Her jaw tightened. She grabbed her suitcase, yanking it upright. You will regret this, she spat. One day you'll realize what you lost. Damian watched her drag the suitcase toward the door, the wheels catching on the uneven floor. I already know what I almost lost, he said quietly, and it wasn't you. She paused at the doorway, but he didn't give her anything more, not a plea, not a chance, not a reason to stay. She slammed the door behind her. The apartment felt lighter instantly. Rosa appeared from the hallway, worry painted across her face. Is everything okay? She asked. Damian's eyes softened as he looked at her, really looked at her. The woman who saved his son. The woman who stayed when everything fell apart. The woman who never asked for anything in return. It is now, he said softly. Rosa hesitated. Should I check on the boys again? In a minute, Damian said. I just wanted to thank you for everything. For risking yourself tonight. She smiled gently. They needed me, that's all that matters. It matters to me, he answered. More than you know. Their eyes held each other's for a moment, quiet, warm, full of something that hadn't existed between them before. Something that felt both familiar and terrifyingly new. The storm outside had passed. But the one that had shaken their lives had finally cleared too. And in its place, for the first time, something honest began. The true lesson of this story is not simply about wealth, deception, or even betrayal, but about how the human heart reveals its deepest truths when comfort is stripped away. People often dress themselves in polished manners, curated appearances, and rehearsed affection when life is easy, but only hardship has the power to peel away the layers and expose what lies beneath. Damian's test, though extreme, served as a magnifying glass over the souls of the two women closest to his children. What unfolded was not a transformation but a revelation of selfishness in one and compassion in the other. Emily behaved like someone who believed love was a transaction, something owed to her in exchange for the lifestyle she desired. Her loyalty was conditional, her kindness performative, and her commitment non-existent the moment luxury vanished. She showed that when a person's devotion is tied to wealth, it dissolves faster than smoke in the wind. Rosa, meanwhile, revealed the opposite, of that love rooted in sincerity remains steady even when everything else falls apart. Her sacrifices showed that the truest measure of character is found not in grand gestures witnessed by the world, but in quiet choices made without recognition, reward, or obligation. The story teaches that real wealth is not measured in money, status, or possessions. It is measured in the people who run toward you when life burns down, not those who run away from the flames. Damian's downfall, though orchestrated, became a mirror reflecting the values of those around him. Emily valued the glittering symbols of success more than the people behind them. She saw Damian's fortune as a foundation she could build her own image upon, and when that foundation cracked, she scrambled to protect herself. Even at the expense of innocent children, her instinct was not to come for her help, but to escape. She showed that when someone's love depends on what you can provide, they do not love you, they love the benefits of being near you. And when those benefits disappear, so do they. Rosa, however, embodied the lesson that real love is revealed through action, often unglamorous, exhausting, and invisible action. She didn't love the children because it was her job. She didn't help Damian because she expected gratitude or prosperity. She didn't run into the storm for approval or acknowledgement. She did it because love, when genuine, makes no calculations about what is given and what is received. She risked her safety because a child needed her. She stayed in the cramped apartment because the family she cared for was hurting. She gave without measuring the cost, and in doing so, she exposed the profound truth that loyalty is not found in words but in consistent, often difficult choices. The story also teaches a crucial lesson about perspective, how crisis reshapes what we think is important. In Beverly Hills, surrounded by wealth and comfort, Damian was blinded by routine, familiarity, and the illusion that security meant happiness. But in Isla, stripped of everything he thought defined him, he discovered what truly mattered. He realized that money could build houses but not homes, that luxury could attract attention but not affection, and that success could buy compliance but never loyalty. When he witnessed Rosa comforting his sons, protecting them, and risking her safety for them, he understood that the foundation of a meaningful life is built not on wealth but on character. It was only in the most uncomfortable place, during the most desperate moment, that he saw the difference between someone who fit into his lifestyle and someone who fit into his life. Emily's impulsive decision to try to exchange the children for money also serves as a powerful lesson about responsibility and moral compass. Children, vulnerable and innocent, depend on the adults around them to safeguard their future. Emily's willingness to discard them like obligations exposed a devastating truth: some people see relationships as burdens, not bonds. Her actions teach that when someone treats others as negotiable, disposable, or replaceable, they are incapable of real connection. Love cannot grow in the soil of selfishness. The story further highlights a message about resilience and courage. Rosa didn't come from privileges, she came from struggle. Yet instead of allowing hardship to harden her, it shaped her into someone capable of extraordinary empathy. Her courage was not loud or dramatic, it was practical, instinctive, and powerful. Running into a storm in a dangerous neighborhood was not heroic in her own eyes, it was necessary. Real strength is like that, unassuming, humble, and often unnoticed except by those who are saved by it. Through Rosa, the story teaches that bravery does not require wealth or status, it requires heart. Finally, the core lesson of the story is this: a family is not defined by blood, wealth, or appearance, it is defined by love, sacrifice, and presence. Emily had every material advantage, every cosmetic tool to construct the appearance of a perfect life partner, but none of the emotional depth. Rosa had nothing except her heart, and that was enough to hold a broken family together in its darkest moment. Damian learned that when everything else falls apart, the people who stay not because they have to, not because it benefits them, but because they care, are the true treasures of a lifetime. The story reminds us that love is proven, not spoken, loyalty is shown, not promised, and the people who stand beside you in hardship are worth more than all the wealth you could ever lose.
If you find this video helpful, don't forget to hit like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss upcoming videos. If you have any suggestions or questions, feel free to leave a comment below. I'd really love to hear your feedback. Thank you for watching until the end.